Our hymn book, through our psalmist, gives us these instructions to come. Let's come personally, come together to worship. And we have been looking yesterday and we look today at great warnings. And so the expectation is that we know something of our history. One of the great titles for us is the people of God. We're called of God, we know God, and we know his ways. And God, in his love and grace, steps out to us to remind us not to be so foolish as to ignore our forebears, and he allows their rebellion to be a place of instruction for us, if we will take it. If we won't, then we shall end up with the same heart as our forebears. What a tragedy. And the psalmist takes us back to the 40 years in the wilderness. The wilderness signifies that rebellious generation. Please, when you have time, take some time, because you won't understand it if you don't. Look at the book of Numbers, chapter 14. Look at the warnings scattered, but yet gathered around Psalm 95 in Hebrews chapter 3 and chapter 4. The worship of God is a serious business, not frivolous. And so we now see that God speaks into the generation of old, and clearly, very quickly, they don't want him. They don't want what he's done. In fact, in Numbers 14, you find ever so quickly, we want to elect a leader who will do what? Who will lead us? Where? Back into Egypt. What a short memory. You want to go back into that slavery at the end? And the answer is yes, they did. Because they were more comfortable with all that kind of suffering that they had come to bear than to take the adventure with God. The Scottish poet Robert Louis Stevenson, at the end of the 19th century, wrote a phrase that's come into common parlance. To travel hopefully is a better thing to arrive. The Bible would say that's wrong. What Robbie Louis Stevenson was doing was quoting Chinese religion, and it's passed so easily. Yes, we enjoy the pilgrimage, but we have a destiny, we have a place, and we have a person who is inviting us to be with him in that new place. And so God, in the warning, says, they will not enter into my rest. The rest that had been offered was the promised land. But people then, as now, choose the rebellious over and against the loving obedience of our Lord. Now, does that mean we can't ask questions? Of course we can ask questions. Again, one of the things about the wilderness was this. Not only were they rebellious in their heart, but that rebellion led to rank unbelief. So yes, we can question. Belief does not preclude true questioning. If it did, many of the Psalms would have to be knocked out. We are allowed to question. We're allowed to question God, and we are allowed to say yes to God, who wants to question us. Not so much for information on his part, but here we are again, an exposure of our hearts. So yes, let us come, but let us come in the seriousness of worship, laying aside every temptation to rebellion, to unbelief, and simply settling down or going back.